Last time, a sequel to the hit survival horror Resident Evil 1 had begun production under director Hideki Kamiya and producer Shinji Mikami, but this early Resident Evil 2 prototype went through a catastrophic collapse due to its bland and boring story, gameplay, and environments, let alone the constant infighting amongst the team. With the coming of professional writer Noboru Sugimura, Kamiya and Mikami made the hard decision to start development of Resident Evil 2 from scratch, utilizing Sugimura's new and robust direction and story with a delay of 1 year on the table, and thus the old phase was now labeled as Resident Evil 1.5 by the team, with the real development beginning now. Together with much evolution between 1.5 and 2, further changes in development, and still a ton of cut elements, today on this final part, we shall explore the history and beta unused content of Resident Evil 2. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button too, to further support us and keep creating new videos. With Resident Evil 1.5 scrapped, the ship was being pivoted back on course. Being that Resident Evil was Capcom's major plot-focused series at the time, what was needed to set course was a good story. Despite how flawed the story of 1.5 was, writer Noboru Sugimura felt some elements of it were worth keeping. This included the citywide outbreak, Leon S. Kennedy as one of the protagonists, and several supporting characters and enemy characters. Leon in his original art for 1.5 had him depicted in several civilian costumes. It is speculated that they may have played a part originally in Leon wearing them before switching to his formal cop uniform. Whether that is the case or if these were just unlockable costumes, Sugimura decided for Leon to always have his police uniform on. One aspect that Sugimura felt was direly missing from the original story was his ties to the original Resident Evil. While keeping Raccoon City in as a tie that made sense, more was needed, and the obvious solution came at the cost of sacrificing another. The female protagonist, Elza Walker, was to be removed and replaced with a new female character, who happened to be the sister of Resident Evil 1's protagonist, Chris Redfield, going by the name Claire Redfield, a character who was to come to Raccoon City in search of her brother, a clear direct tie to the first game. Claire started out with a few radically different designs that usually sported a combination of plaid, a white shirt, and jeans in some form before coming to her final design that even featured a coat with the Made in Heaven symbol on it that Chris wore on his jacket as an alternate costume in the first game. In fact, the ties didn't stop there, as one of the supporting characters that were to be carried over was to receive a major change, this being the character Linda. But in order to further link it with the first game, she was renamed as Ada. Ada being the password for Umbrella researcher John's computer in the first game. This, along with her role heavily being altered to not be an Umbrella undercover researcher, but now an undercover agent working for an unnamed organization, with the story of her looking for her supposed boyfriend John in the midst of this chaos. Ada also was to be redesigned, with one concept even giving her a brown coat, but eventually just simplified to a red dress. In this version, both Claire and Leon were to have only one supporting character each, instead of 2 or 3. As such, both characters, including Marvin Branagh and Robert Kendo, were to be relegated to minor roles of just a dying cop and a gun shop owner, Roy being removed altogether. This, along with Police Chief Brian Irons turning into a corrupt and sadistic cop, while Annette Birkin, who was to originally transform by the G-Virus, was to never be infected. And so, the new story of Resident Evil 2 was now coming to fruition. The story now takes place 3 months after the horrific ventures into the Spencer Mansion from the first game, with Leon arriving in Raccoon City on his first day as a cop, while Claire comes to the city in search of her brother Chris, both unfortunately getting caught up with the chaos that was a citywide zombie outbreak and leading them to take refuge within the Raccoon Police Department. As the scenario was being written, Sugimura and director Hideki Kamiya were in constant discussion on the direction the story should go and how it would affect the gameplay. A major change was proposed by Sugimura regarding the police station. In 1.5, the police station was a simple, realistic one with regular halls and regular rooms, and yet somehow had puzzles for no lore-based reason. Sugimura felt that the backstory for the police station being an art museum at one point would solve as to why it had hidden and strange puzzles all over the place for the pair to tackle, and so to create this grand hall of a police station, the team would visit structures in Japan with a Western architecture for influence, and even taking photos to create pre-rendered backgrounds of the station utilizing the SGI O2 workstation, whereby they would start as a simple polygonal shape before being given a proper design, and even utilizing a simple tofu-like block character with arms to test the game's collision, and so many of the environments greatly evolved along the way, many of which saw minor changes and tweaks, such as the elevator room here with the switch and sign being notably different, or simply a different camera angle such as these. However, major changes include Chief Iron's office, which had a stuffed bear and tiger in his room, further showcasing his sadistic side, but might have been a bit overkill and thus removed. Lesser changes included the gun shop, which had a non-broken version with its sign, but by the final game, it was always broken and had no sign. The archive room originally looked ransacked before being appropriately filled. The corridors leading to the train had a wall that initially had a massive bloody hole there, but was gone by the end. Even has a close-up of it, potentially a hole Mr. X would have punctured, those along with several other angles, including for the evidence room. One in the office featuring Marvin with a JoJo reference at that. Another in a dark room, the drawer for Chris's desk in the Star's office, which likely held an item at one point. Another also in the same room, but was utilized for the demo featuring Ada at the end, as well as one for the basement generator room of a table, stairs in a sewer, and two unused angles of the surveillance room. But there was one major idea that Kamiya had, one that he's been carrying since the near end of Resident Evil 1's development, this being a feature known as Zapping. Within Resident Evil 1.5, each protagonist and their supporting cast had a separate scenario and wouldn't lead to any interactions or crossovers with one another. This time, Hideki Kamiya wanted them to not just encounter each other, but to have an A and B storyline. This would mean that once you finish one character's story, the second one would start up right after and show their perspective of what they were doing concurrently. The second one showing the game's true antagonist, T00, better known as Mr. X. Mr. X is set up as the game's tyrant and sent in to locate the new G-Virus and eliminate any survivors in the police station. He was a character that was actually created by Shinji Mikami to be used within Sugimura's story. While always sporting a trench coat, his appearance changed quite a bit, starting off lankier and tested with various different coat colors, even given large guns at one point before buffed up and just made to fight with his bare hands, all leading to the game's true ending. But this zapping system wasn't set up with just one straight path of going from Leon to Claire, but also from Claire to Leon, where the story beats would be told differently, even though both sides lead to the same true ending. Thus, there were a total of 4 scenarios being written. The zapping system was something Kamiya wanted since Resident Evil 1, but it was brought up so late in development that it couldn't be implemented into the game. But otherwise, the team was going at full force in building this game, able to still keep the up to 7 zombies on screen at once feature of 1.5 at a lower polygon count, while still being able to render both Leon and Claire's models at a detailed 450 polygons each, all while testing out many features, environments, and weapons, some of which would be cut and changed altogether. These include weapons such as the Coleco M950 pistol, taking up 2 inventory slots and using 9mm ammunition, likely meant as a stronger handgun for Leon. Meanwhile, the H&K MC51 machine gun also took up 2 inventory slots, likely the original machine gun for Claire before being replaced with the Mac 11, but likely was replaced as this was the gun being used by the Umbrella soldiers. We also got some unused ammo, such as flamethrower fuel, which oddly enough they never provided a way to refuel the flamethrower, but much like the flamethrower, their spark shot was also to have its own ammo. Most interesting are 3 types of chemicals that were meant to be used by Claire, whereby she would be able to use the red one on grenade rounds to make flame rounds, and blue ones for making acid rounds. Strangely, there was also a green chemical, which was made by using blue and red chemicals and meant to be used for recovery, which in addition, there was also to be a detoxification spray, meant to cure poison outside of blue herbs. There were also fire starters that they were considering, possibly to burn the plants in the laboratory near the end, but as well there were miscellaneous items, such as a watch, that was to be Claire's personal item. These green and yellow keycards to be used together with the red and blue ones for the police station. And even aside from these, virtually every weapon and item had its inventory art updated by the final game. An interesting one being the rocket launcher, which resembled more the one from the first game before its final design. As development was going on, further additions were being made, including the implementation of alternate costumes, which initially for Claire had a different color scheme, while Leon's was a lot veinier and lacked a hat actually, while also originally having the Made in Heaven angel on it too. Meanwhile, some of the team was put in charge of making an updated version of Resident Evil 1 called the Director's Cut. This version, while including updates such as an arranged mode, alterations to weapons, and even restoration of the auto-aim in the English version, was set to come with a demo of Resident Evil 2. This was being done as a means to make up to the fans who had to wait even longer for Resident Evil 2, and since the game now had a proper and working direction, this preview disc was the perfect gift for them, letting one play early in Leon's A scenario up to reaching the STARS office with a preview of Ada at the end of it. One major aspect they wished to build upon was the game's presentation. Resident Evil 1 was infamous for its B-quality cutscenes and low-quality voice acting.
What is that?
I'll go and check.
This time, the idea was to actually build CGI FMV cutscenes rather than using real actors, designing high-quality models for each character. Ada's model, however, couldn't be completed on time, so she was left out of any cutscene. Being a new forte for Capcom, they filmed actors conducting set actions for the FMVs and mapped the models to the actors' movements. Alternatively, a combination of stop-motion animation using action figures and even some motion capture were used in building some of these iconic scenes. For voice acting, unlike the first game, which used amateur American actors living in Japan, they were prompted to use professional English voice actors from Canada, including Paul Hated, who was to voice Leon, but also played several roles including Quicksilver and Archon in X-Men. While Allison Court was to voice Claire Redfield, a voice actor well known for playing many roles, including Jubilee in X-Men as well, an actress who would stay in the role for the next 14 years. And the game's soundtrack was to be up to match those of blockbuster films, with an emphasis on desperation as its theme. Headed by composers Masami Ueda, Seo Nishigaki, Naoshi Mizuta, and Shusaku Uchiyama. As such, strong orchestrations were being made for major story events, and further iconic but somber themes were being made, including the police station, the save room, and even intense tracks like the boss themes, such as the third malformation of G for the William Birkin's boss fight. But as development was starting to wind down, the team had realized that they actually had some spare time before the release date of January 21, 1998. Therefore, they decided to add a bonus scenario. This section, specifically directed by system planner Kazuhiro Aoyama, was called The Fourth Survivor, a reference to the idea of another character surviving outside of Leon, Claire, and Sherry, being mainly an asset flip, as it reused sections and enemies of the game, along with a regular soldier's model mapped to Leon's animation. The character's objective being to take the G virus that he had found in the sewers and deliver to Umbrella, something he already failed to do when he was attacked by William Birkin, who had injected himself with the virus. The character's name was Hunk. Hunk was a name that was translated from the Japanese Hanku, which can be translated as either Hunk or Hank. An anonymous American staff member of the team has reported that the intention was Hank as his name, but the team had misspelled it as Hunk, an assertion that Hideki Kamiya denies. And while they were at it, they added another bonus scenario called Tofu Survivor, whereby they took the tofu block that they were using to test collision and have it go through Hunk's scenario using only a knife. But that's the thing, everything was going smoothly, a little too smoothly for Shinji Mikami's comfort after how badly 1.5 went down. And so one day, as the game was finally to be compiled onto a disc, Mikami got a sudden call from software engineer Yasuhiro Ampo. As soon as Ampo said he had bad news, Mikami just hung up, fearing another development-crushing disaster was imminent. Of course, that didn't stop Ampo from just walking up to Mikami's office, telling him that they couldn't fit the whole game onto one disc and would need a second one. The game was expected to initially fit just in one disc, but there had been a miscalculation due to the game's audio algorithm needing reprogramming. While this might not seem like a major issue, it was still troubling to Mikami as he needed to keep the game within budget. Capcom management was not happy about this at all, as it would require higher manufacturing costs to make double-disc PlayStation cases and also increase shipping costs at that. However, they gave in, as they didn't want the game to be delayed any further at this point. And so we had Leon's scenario on one disc and Claire's scenario on another. As the game was nearing release, anticipation was high for this game, and a $5 million campaign was being prepared by Capcom. Being that it was the height of zombie popularity, who better than George A. Romero, the acclaimed director of Night of the Living Dead, to direct a live-action commercial for the game in their new marketing push, featuring a real Leon and Claire as they sort through weapons and ammo to survive the zombie horde in the police station. This, however, only aired in Japan due to copyright issues. Meanwhile, North America simply got a more general gameplay trailer with some general live-action sections put in. After much trouble, delays, and alterations, Resident Evil 2 released on January 21st, 1998 in North America, January 29, 1998 in Japan, and May 8, 1998 in Europe. Capcom, who initially had low expectations for the first game, had much greater ones for this one, hoping to sell 2 million copies, a tall feat for the late 90s, but it even exceeded that, selling a whopping 3 million copies worldwide in just a month and a half, with 2 million in Japan alone and 1 million in the US. This became very comparable to the sales of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest in 1998, with them selling 1 million at launch, showing how strong the series was with only 2 entries now, and even outpacing Final Fantasy VII and Super Mario 64 in how quickly it was selling. And critically, it stood very strong, scoring well into the 90s, computer and video games feeling that it made the first game redundant, and how much of an improvement it was. IGN feeling its atmosphere was dead on, together with its impressive design, music, and graphics, while GameSpot feeling like it was a product out of Hollywood. Meanwhile, Eurogamer absolutely loving the Zapping system for its added story and replayability. Capcom had succeeded in once again taking a decently successful first entry and making it grow to catastrophic levels, joining now the likes of Mega Man and Street Fighter. In fact, it was such a success, employees even received large dividends, in a practice that Capcom had for employees to receive a bonus for their game's success. And it truly was one of teamwork, geniusly written by Noboru Sugimura, the direction brought alive by Hideki Kamiya, while overlooked by series creator Shinji Mikami amongst the grand staff. And Resident Evil 2's legacy didn't stop there, as the success brought about many different releases for different platforms. A re-release on the PlayStation called the DualShock version, providing analog and rumble, along with an extreme battle minigame and a rookie mode, with that version coming to PC next, that would let it run at a higher resolution, along with a new gallery view and hard mode. This very version being then ported to the Dreamcast, which let it utilize the console's VMU to display the character's health, but bigger than any of those was the impossible port for the Nintendo 64, whereby with the use of the new 64MB cartridges, the outsourced studio, Angel Studios, being impressively able to compress a game that once required 2 700MB PlayStation discs onto one cartridge, all while adding many other extras, including new costumes, the ability to change blood color, an item randomizer mode, new documents, and a more responsive control scheme. This on top of also providing better models and animations, while also able to have a resolution bump using the console's expansion pack. And the game kept receiving ports, with a Gamecube port, a PlayStation Network port, and newer PC ports, including a new upcoming one on GOG that would come together with Resident Evil 1 and 3. But bigger than even that was a remake of this very game many years down the road that would live up to this game's grand presentation in a more modern light. even bringing back some of the elements from 1.5, including the Elsa Walker costume for Claire Redfield, the trenchcoat design for Ada Wong, and civilian clothes for Leon Kennedy. The game had a very troubled development, and the legacy of Resident Evil 1.5 can be considered a case study on how not to develop a major video game, and stands as the very prototype of the game that could have killed this very franchise. Eventually, it found its way into the wild in February 2013, with teams of modders working to restore it and feature it in a playable form ever since. Meanwhile, the release of Resident Evil 2 was one that saw a whole fresh team at Capcom push through failure in order to grow into one of its most important teams, with figures such as Hideki Kamiya, whose staff wanted gone at one point, becoming a major figure himself at the company. And at this point, Kamiya was now planning a sequel to this masterpiece in the form of an early Resident Evil 3. And thank you for watching! Hit the subscribe button for more Resident Evil and other games gaming history and cut content soon. Hit the like button and comment below on if you feel this was the best direction the game took, or if you feel it should have stayed with the 1.5 prototype. So everyone, thank you for watching!